Dear listeners, and thank you for joining Josh today, and it's good to Hi everyone. Today our subject's on managing change and managing positive habits. Habits are part of our life. It impacts on our thoughts, our feeling, and our behavior and our actions. They can be both source of empowerment and a stumbling block. The ability to manage our habits effectively, whether positive or negative, is crucial for personal growth and our well-being. So today I have a guest. His name is Chris. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, my name is Chris, Chris Padovan. I live in Italy. I'm a life coach, and I've chosen to live in this beautiful spot in Italy, which is Lake Garda, where I can work and where I can also do a lot of sports because it's a very good place for sports, water sports in particular. And I've been working as a life coach for now 5 years, and I work with groups and one-on-ones.
So Chris, just going back as a life coach, so both of us are life coach and we work with a lot of clients around managing positive habits and how to create positive habits. So just before we talk about that, in terms of developing strategies and mechanism, so what made you, can I ask you before, what did you do before you became a life coach? What was your role? Like what kind of work did you do?
Well, I always work with people, and I had my own school, language school. So coming originally from Switzerland, I'm multilingual. So I thought that I could share that with people, and I actually opened my school, and I've been working as a teacher and as a manager for my school. So that allowed me to meet a lot of people, to get in touch with a lot of different stories and lives. And eventually I realized that people were coming to my school and wanted to see me more for the contents than for the language. And so that's when I realized that maybe I had to invest more on that.
So, so what made you want to open up the language, the center, the teaching center?
Well, that's an interesting question. I never thought about it very much because it was like natural to me. I would say it probably was my dream since I was a child, and but also because I lived in different places in Europe. I lived in the Netherlands, I lived in London, in Switzerland, as I said, and in other places. And I've always been attracted by cultures and languages. And since I was a child, I always had a little notebook where I would just write a word in one language and try to translate it in all the other ones. And it was my fixation. And until I got to the point that I really wanted to share this with the world. So when I was in my 30s, I decided to do that. And I became a teacher in a private school. And then I worked in public schools and private schools. And I opened my own school eventually.
Well, it's interesting you talk about language. I know you speak about 4 or 5 language. So again, what is it about language that attracted you? Because you speak Italian, English, Switzerland, German, French. So what was about language that attracted you?
Would you mean emotionally or? Yeah. That's a very interesting question. I mean, my first language is French, so with your native language, you don't really understand what type of connection you have. I mean, it just allows you to express yourself. I think the language that attracts me most was Dutch, that I learned when I was living in Amsterdam. Well, Well, probably because it was a particular moment in my life. And I think that if you link emotions in language, it actually allows you to learn the language faster and better. So yeah, probably associate a language to a very important moment in my life. And therefore, and that's interesting to notice that I haven't been speaking Dutch for a long time. And whenever I meet somebody from the Netherlands, it just comes up naturally because there's this emotional link. And it works.
Yeah, and that's really interesting what you say, because as we're talking about habits, so for you, do you feel one of the aspects and the skill sets that you have is being able to have a great habit of learning language quickly, understanding the sound, the words?
Well, yes. You mean turning the learning into a habit?
Yeah.
Well, definitely there are some things that you have to keep in mind when you want to learn a language, which are consistency, frequency. I think I've always thought that when it comes to a language, really it is use it or lose it. So what your brain does is that it opens up with sort of curiosity to that language, but it closes immediately the moment it understands that that language is not so important in your life. And it's interesting to notice that when you get into a sort of survival mode, when you are in a country and you have to speak that language, then immediately the reaction of your brain is to open up completely to the language and you absorb it. Yeah. So then I understood that you have to put your mind into a survival state if you want to really learn a language. And that's what I did with my students. And I think it worked a lot because we created situations in which that language was necessary to convey something, to convey a message, to express themselves and to get in touch with others. So that's when you create that urgency, that urge on the brain that happens.
From that, opening up your school and teaching. So what attracted you to become a life coach, and in terms of, your skill sets? How did you, what made you, what was your motivation behind becoming a life coach?
Well, as I said before, I already noticed when I was teaching that I would connect to the essence of a person. And instead of having language classes, we turn the conversation into conversation about real things. But I realized that, yes, I was attractive for people to talk about things, going deeper, because I like going deeper into anything I do. But I lacked the structure, so I needed a structure to go on with that. And that's when I decided that a school, a course would do for the structure it would allow me to have and provide. So that's the first step was that. But then that being a teacher, being a life coach is almost the opposite in the sense that when you're a teacher, you impart things, you have to push, you have to lead. That's exactly what you're not supposed to do when you're a life coach, because you let the person, your client, on the driver's seat and just ask questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for sharing with that, Chris. I understand. I mean, one of the things that me and you have previously talked about when we're working with clients, especially around habits, like changing, habits into making it a more positive and constructive way. In your understanding, what do you understand about habits? What do we mean by habits?
Well, I have to say that I'm a habits. I like and I love routines. I love habits. The more you give me, the more I implement them in my life. And what do I need for my habits? I think the basic definition of what a habit can be is a repetition that takes you to a certain result. That brings me back to also teaching languages. When you teach a language, you have to constantly repeat. You have to be there. You have to be consistent. A habit is the same thing. You just break down. You look at the goal. You understand what the work can be to get you there, and then you break it down in little pieces and little steps. Those steps need to be repeated, and that's what I see as a habit.
I agree with you what you're saying, but I also like know from our experience of working with clients, and generally, I think what we don't realize that we have a habit every day. We get up in the morning, we have a shower, we have lunch, breakfast, dinner. There's all this element of natural habits that we have, but the habits that we're talking about is the positive habits. How do you create that in your daily routine? So, like one of the examples that we were exploring, it was about how do we have habits which can enhance your emotional well-being, like having healthy sleeping, healthy eating habits, healthy relationship with friends and families. So from a life coach perspective, yeah, Chris, what do you think is the motivation to establish a good habit for individuals?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up this difference between positive habits and negative habits. And I really make a distinction as well, because I think that what we call negative habits are actually not consciously chosen most of the time, whereas positive habits that you mentioned are something we choose, something we add to our life because we give our life a certain direction. When I think about positive habits, I think the first step is to get conscious. Consciousness is the first step. Where are you? Do you like it where you are? Do you want more? Do you want to go in that direction? So you need to to bring consciousness to your life and then decide where you're going. And that's the beginning of creating positive habits.
So, Chris, you talk about consciousness. What do you mean by consciousness? Listeners might not, not be clear about what consciousness means. How would you define consciousness?
Well, most of the people live in a state of in a robotic way. Okay, we don't really think about what we do. We just do it because we've been trained, we've been taught, we've been told. We travel with the autopilot all the time. So the first thing is actually to set the autopilot off and turn it off. Sit down, listen to yourself, look at your life. That's a simple definition of what a consciousness is. Just realizing where you are, switching off the autopilot.
But that is a challenge for a lot of people, isn't it? Because if you're just doing daily, every day, you're repeating the same stuff, and you're not aware of it. So one of the ways I would say, both as a life coach, is about being aware of what is good for you, like in terms of healthy habits. For example, so people who might smoke a lot or might drink a lot or might overeat, and if they're not aware that this is actually bad for them, how would they be consciously become aware of that? What are the tools that are available for them to do that?
Well, that pushes a certain button for me, because when I coach people, my system is based on, as myself, talking about myself, not having good and bad. So I try to go beyond good and bad and right and wrong, so over the duality. Now that's me, that's my attitude with life. And so coming back to what habits can be, good or bad, negative or positive, it's a big question, it's a big point, because would you tell a sadomasochist that he has bad habits?
No. Yeah.
Now, it's a matter of what you think, what serves you. Let's put it like that. What habit serves you, given the direction you want to take, and what habit doesn't serve you. There are good habits that don't serve you. There are bad habits that serve you. Let's say that's an interesting paradox about paradoxes.
So can you give me and my listeners example of a habit that you probably was not healthy for you, but you practiced it and you overcome that habit?
Well, that happened quite recently. I had the habit of eating very late in the evening. So like I finished work at 8, 9, and then I cooked. And we are in Italy. Cooking is a very important part of our life. We like food, we like eating, and we eat pretty late. So I had the habit of eating very late, like 10 o'clock. And I would go to bed at midnight or 1. So that gave me 3 hours for digesting. I didn't realize that I had some digestion problems in my stomach going on during the night. And a couple of months ago, I had some problems in my throat, and I was losing my voice, and so I was really wondering what was going on. I thought, okay, because I talk a lot during the day, but I went to my doctor, and he said that after all the checkup, he said that it was a stomach. Because if you go to bed very late and you lie down, you've got the acids coming up to your throat, and that corrodes your throat. So it's not very nice for the throat. And so that was a habit that I had. As pleasure as it could be to sit down in front of television and eat late because you want to prioritize your job and because you love your job, that was a bad habit. I had to change it, and I had to change it like a month ago. Drastically. So I have dinner at 5, which is inconceivable in this country because they think you have a snack in the afternoon at that time, if you have it. So I started to have dinner at 5 so that I allow my stomach to have like 15 hours. It's like intermittent fasting, basically. Yeah. But I was just curious to see the difference and see what happened in my body, what happened in my... And then we go to exactly what happens when you start new habits. I wouldn't have done that before what happened to my stomach. But I have to say, in 1 month, this habit has changed a lot in my body, in my mind, in the way I think, in the freshness of my mind as well. So that gives you an example of what a bad habit was. And again, it goes to the fact that I was doing it unconsciously just because I was prioritizing my job and I was pushing dinner very, very late. And I liked it because it was comforting to go to bed with a full stomach. But again, I was on the autopilot. I wasn't really realizing what I was doing. Now I am. I had to stop. I had to realize. I had to listen to my stomach. I had to see the options I had, and I had to experiment. And I think curiosity is an important ingredient in this at this point.
But that's interesting you say that, because you became self-aware and you realize. But what happens when we are talking about generally sometimes when people are not aware of their habits, that's having a major impact on their emotional or physical well-being? Like one of the examples that when I'm working with clients, who are trying to improve their health, is a habit of like a daily exercise. Now, everyone assumes that if you go to the gym for an hour or 2 hours and you pump up or you're running, that's really healthy. Yeah, that is healthy. But what they don't realize, what I call the 1% rule, where we talk about you can do everything just a little bit every day, like 10, 15 minutes, doing something like meditation. Like some people are religious, you may pray for 10, 15 minutes or just going for a walk. So one of the ways that we can share our skills and knowledge is to say to people that you don't have to create a habit. You don't have to go gung ho. You don't have to join a gym. You don't have to, go extreme, do you? You can do it in small bites, yeah?
Yeah.
So our listeners, what would you share with one of the areas how they can improve their habits? One of their strategies, Chris.
A very simple trick that I use. I mean, I'm a man of system. I love habits. I love routines. It's never an effort for me. It's just I'm very experimental. I like trying things. I like to push to raise the bar. So from my point of view, there's no way to force. I don't have to force myself into habits, but I understand that, and I know a lot of people don't like to get out of the comfort zone and themselves. The one thing that I do, and it's a very interesting trick, is what I call the habits by default. So what you do is that, especially if you're lazy and if you don't have the commitment, I make an example of a default habit that sometimes I did in the past until I integrated it in my life. Let's say I want to go running every morning, or let's start with little steps once a week. I want to go running once a week, and let's say it's Monday or Tuesday morning. What I do is that I put the running shoes in front of my door in the evening, and I hang my shorts and my t-shirt on the door, so that reminds me the day after when I wake up, I have breakfast, I go on with my routine, but then I see these shoes there and everything else that I need. And that reminds me, and even if I want to turn the blind eye, I still have to see it when I go out. So that's what it's not that it forces me, but it's a reminder, and it's a sweet reminder, because it's not, something I have to. It's there. So I just put my shoes on, I put my things on, I go out, and I go running. I do the same with breakfast, for example. Do I have to eat more fruit? Well, I put the fruit in my bowl in the evening, and I put it on the table already where I have breakfast, so that I don't have to make the effort the day after thinking about, where can I get my fruit, or what can I eat today? I do it before. I anticipate myself with default habits, which I don't think is tiring, and I don't think it's challenging. It's actually fun, you devise your day the day before, putting these signals around. Let's say if I have to go to work and I must remember to take something, I put it there as well.
Yeah, but what you're talking about is motivation, Chris, right?
Yeah.
So it's having the motivation, isn't it? And the awareness to say, right, this is what I need to do. But what happened, but not everyone can be motivated, Chris. If you're working long hours, if you're, really stressed out, if you've got anxiety, or if you're suffering from health issues, right? Is how do you create that? So one of the areas I always say to people is write down, write down on a journal, what could I do to improve my quality of my life and improve quality of my habits. So in one side, write down all the habits that you have now and which are not good for you, and write down the new habits that you can create that will be beneficial for you, right? But then the other aspect of creating a positive habit, Chris, is this. I think your environment and your surrounding in terms of your friends, your family, play a really, really important part on how you develop a positive habit. Would you agree?
I totally agree. I think that having a partner or having a family or having friends who do the same activities with you, and let's talk about the running that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Yes, I put my shoes in front of a door, but if I also have a friend who comes at the time we agreed upon, and buzzes, and I just go down, it helps a lot, of course, that the environment helps. But coming back to commitment, I think that one of the things that needs to be addressed first is that your habits must be aligned with your values, because otherwise you're not going to go very far with your results and with your commitment. It's very important to know what your values are. And so that goes back again to the sadomasochistic boy or girl or whatever, who has these habits. And they resonate with their values.
Can I just interrupt you? But some people who might do drugs or alcohol or have a different perspective of life, does that mean the habit is bad?
Well, that's exactly what I was saying before. Bad, good. What is bad and what is good? The question is, how does the habit respond to his values? So,
and also your emotional, physical well-being, isn't it? Your habits. Yeah.
If you drink because you want to have fun and you want to be to see life from a different perspective, you want to be more social, because that's also what happens when you drink, I suppose. Then you understand that your values. You've got strong values on sociability and on fun. So it would be easier to devise other habits related to having fun and to being social.
But on that point, me and you have talked several times about having put habits in terms of relationship, right? So why is it that when when people get into relationship, there's a creation of a habit which is quite negative, where self-sabotage, anxiety, lack of appreciation of the partner, right, Chris? Now, that is a habit, isn't it? That is a habit that we sort of manage to manifesto and create ourselves, don't we? Because it's a history that repeats itself, isn't it? It's a vicious circle, isn't it? So how can we share with our audience in terms of understanding that when you are in a relationship, what is a triggering aspect of bad habits, and how do you protect yourself?
What you mean is that when you're in a relationship, the presence of the other person triggers bad habit on you?
It's a combination, isn't it? Because you, for example, when you're in a relationship, it's about negotiation, it's about listening, it's about respecting. But what happens if you're in a relationship where the habits is always the person devalues you, doesn't respect you, there's no self-care, there's no respect, then you start, it impacts on your motivation, on your ego, on you as a person. Chris? I have seemed to lost Chris. Dear listeners, and thank you for joining Josh today, and it's good to talk to Josh now. So today's subject. Hi, Chris.
Okay.
Yes,
Back to normal. Yes.
no, so we just want to add, but Chris, so we're talking about in terms of habits in relationships, and how, as individuals, we manage that manage positive habit in relationship, and how do we protect ourselves in terms of self-respect, care. Now, what are the signs do you think that you, as individual, can see in a relationship that says, actually, this is not good, this is a bad habit, this is having major impact on my emotional and physical well-being? How do you think they can identify that, and what are the triggering points?
Well, the question is always, why did you accept that relationship? Why did you accept that
But
environment?
sometimes people don't have a choice, do they? Sometimes people don't see that they're in a bad relationship, and it's having a major impact on how they are and who they are, do they?
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Yes, but still goes back to the values, because if you have, well, there are some stages. I mean, sometimes some people get into a relationship that is destructive and rather negative,
Yeah.
but they appreciate it somehow. So it must resonate with the
It
party.
must serve them. It must serve. Are you saying it must serve?
Okay. You see, we're going back to that point. So you've got certain values, yeah, and you develop certain habits, and that's perfect to develop it with that person, because that person lends their self for this goal. The point is, sometimes during a relationship we change, we grow, and we start to see things on different perspectives, and then it's at that point that we feel that something is wrong, because there's a clash with a new value and with a new perspective on what can be a relationship. So it goes a lot to that. Would you change the habits, not changing the partner? That would create a little bit of a
Tension, yeah.
I mean,
Also, because if you're talking about habits like that in relationship, then you're talking about power dynamics, isn't it? You're talking about who has the power or who doesn't, or is it a relationship that's built on trust, confidentiality?
well, it's something. There are things you have to discuss. It's important to discuss with your partner. And I can make an example in my life. I mean, I have a lot of habits. I pick habits every month and I integrate them in my life. And of course, I have a partner, so he must be aware of what's going on in my life and my new habits. That doesn't always happen. So,
Can I ask you something? Does your partner find a habit that he dislikes about you?
oh, well, yes, because there are a lot. And of course, there is a certain percentage that is not exactly pleasurable for him. And
How do you deal with that when someone says to you, Chris, this habit I don't like? So how do you deal with that, and what does the emotional impact it has on you?
well, you can take it personally because a habit usually speaks about yourself. So it's your emanation, it's your way to express, and so you may get offended, you may take it personally. That's a point. But that's why it's very important to understand the type of relationship you're in. And I'm happy that I have a relationship in which I can discuss these kind of things, and I can find a way, which is, I don't know, I'm going to do this kind of thing on my own at a certain time on a certain day, and we can do the other things together. So I think it mostly goes to the type of relationship you have and how that relationship allows you to express yourself in good and in bad. See, again, you can't only choose to be only good or only bad. In a relationship, you are who you are.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. That's interesting. But moving on from that, one of the things that I always explore with my clients when I'm doing life coaching is I always ask them, what are the obstacles or the challenges, that you encounter when you're trying to overcome or develop positive habits, right? And one of the reasons I found when I'm working with individual clients is that their friends have a really good or bad impact on the habits. Do you know that? So, for example, if your friends, you go out all the time, they smoke, they drink, or they do drugs, whatever that is, and if that has influences you because you might not have the character or the willpower sometimes to say no to certain things, right? So how does one individually educate themselves to say, well, actually, this is an obstacle for me and this is not healthy, this set of friends, or how do we explore that and how do we develop strategies to manage that in a positive way?
My usual attitude of not taking anything for good and bad at first, I would just stop and realize that whatever comes as an obstacle or a challenge is testing your resolve. Yeah. So that's the positive thing about it. I have a new habit. I really want to do this. Then my friends are against. They don't allow me to do it. Well, that's the test. That's the test of how much I want it. First of all.
But what about Chris? But you said that. But habits are influenced by our friends and our environments. It has a major impact, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because we choose friends because they reflect and value who we are. Because you always make friends with the people that you feel have the same vision of you, same value, believe in the same system. They may be the same cultural background, sexual background, whatever that is, or there's an identity, isn't it? But those people can have impact on your habits, right? Some habits could be really positive, right? In terms of they listen to you, they hear you out, they care for you. But what about those habits that constantly make you feel stressed, fearful, and feel like you haven't got no voice?
Well, I can go back to when I was 16 and I started to be vegetarian. That was a big challenge. I was back in the 80s where vegetarian shops and vegetarian food was not exactly the trend. So I was 16. I was probably the only one in my group of friends. I was the only one at home. You definitely tested, and it tested my commitment several times, because your friends would eat meat and they would scorn you because, oh, look at this is a piece of chicken. Look at this. First of all, but then you go home and your parents don't want you to eat just vegetables and rice or whatever it is, but they want to cook meat for you because it's got protein. Okay, so I remember it as a very, very big test. And ultimately, it directed me to new type of people. I changed the clan, I changed the people around me. Of course, you have to find people who resonate with you and with your choices. So that, as you pointed out, is a very straight link between your habits and the people surrounding you. Your habits, as I said, talk about you. They are who you are, and you change people around you consequently. That's people say, okay, you changed, now you're different, we don't want to see you anymore. I had that in my life too.
But that's really valuable what you're saying. But in modern society, Chris, one of the habits that I've noticed a lot of people have is a habit of, the information technology. Well, I'm talking about information technology. I'm talking about iPhones, Just Eat. Have you noticed the habit of how we have a lot of takeaways, that habit of Friday nights, Saturday nights, without realizing actually this habit of ours is not quite healthy because we order a lot of unhealthy food, and that has an impact on our digestive system, our relationship with food, and also we see food as something just to consume rather than something that's healthy, that should be beautiful, that should be constructed by people together in the kitchen, something that should be enjoyed, something that should be manufactured. Yeah, I mean that habit is, I think, is having a really fundamental impact on the relationship that we have with food and society. What do you feel, Chris?
Well, again, we hit a spot that's very much the tradition in this country. Food is always pleasure.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like that everywhere. I mean, we look for pleasure in food. So if you give healthy food to somebody who is used to junk food and tasty junk food, of course, he would find it disgusting. So the idea of the thinking, okay, I'm going to be here, therefore I'm going to eat healthier, does not always work, because healthy food sometimes is not as tasty as junk food.
No, they're not.
But again, you can't forget your values, you can't forget your principles. If you like the good in food, if you like the taste, well, you're going to have to find healthy food that is also tasty. Because otherwise it's not going to work. If you really want to invest in the long term, it has to resonate with you.
Yeah. So one of the aspect of happy habits, when it comes positive habits, when we look at our daily routine, is that looking at saying, if I'm consuming a lot of food that's not made, that's not healthy, that's not fresh. Now, what is that having impact on my emotion as well as my physical and my body? Because if you don't create a habit where you're looking after your body and your mind, then it's going to impact on your performance, i.e. when you're at work, your relationship with your family, your friends, and the other aspect, the relationship that you have with yourself. Because by creating a habit where you can say, right, I might get takeaway once or twice a week, but other times I'm going to cook at home, or I'm going to, do something. When we're talking about cooking, we're not talking about 5-star like Gordon Ramsay. You can cook pasta, you can do chicken, boiled egg, whatever. It doesn't have to be fancy, does it? So I mean, Chris, it's all about creating small changes so that you can see how you can improve your emotional and physical well-being, isn't it, Chris?
Well, yes, and if you don't want to have it a too strong impact, you can also have the cheat day in which you just dedicate time to the most trashy food you can eat because you just like it. So that's also doing things step by step. You don't have to be too extreme, because the moment you become extreme, you also hit the point where you go back to scratch, to just by reaction,
And you say that because one other aspect of it is like, you don't deny yourself. Do not deny yourself, the pleasure of eating something, because the more you deny it, the more you're going to fight for it, isn't it? You're going to struggle, you're going to have issues. So one of the things is to take a small step. Yes, if you fancy having a drink or whatever, do it in moderation, isn't it? It's about moderation. Talking about habits in those terms, that I just want to move the conversation slightly bit forward. What about, do you feel, habits in terms of religion or meditation? What's your view on that?
Well, I've been studying, I've been doing spiritual studies now for like 15 years in my life, and I've integrated it in my life and in my day from the moment I wake up until evening. And I have rituals or habits every moment before I start a session with somebody, when I wake up, when I go to bed. I like ritualizing my day, but I think that the whole point is to see myself grow, to see myself at a very good energy, and also honor life. It's part of appreciation. You've got this beautiful thing which is life, which is an incredible opportunity, and you thank it. You realize it when you wake up in the morning. You open your eyes. Again, another day. And it's given for free. So one of the most precious thing in life, which is life, is for free. And that's incredible, because we pay a lot for other things. And at least the least you can do is to be grateful, to have a ritual of gratefulness. And so having said that, I have a lot of ritual when it comes to meditation, spirituality, and that's where I put most of my habits. I increase and increase and increase, and it's like, for me, at that point, it's like dancing with life. It's like creating a language of communication with life as an entity. And I need to dance with it. I need to communicate with it. And if you don't do anything, there is no communication. You just live passively. You are lived by life. You don't live life.
And I agree with you, because I think the religion always gets a bad bashing, doesn't it, by the liberal medias and all the other medias. But I think with religion, it gives you structure, it gives you a balance, it gives you a daily habit and routine, which is positive, because it's an opportunity to reflect on your day, reflect on who you are, become aware, and also be grateful, as you say. But you don't have to always be religious to do that. You can do, as you say, you can do meditation, you can do other form of exercise. It's finding what is, for me, it's about individual finding what is important value for them, and how do they create those values in order to create a positive habits that will enhance their life and fulfill their true potential, dream, hope, and aspirations. Yeah, I mean,
it's interesting. Sorry, but I had a question for you this time. Yeah. Because you mentioned religion, and religion gives you a set of principles and rituals. I mean, it doesn't have to be religion; it can be a spiritual habits of spirituality. But then I had, while we're talking now, we started talking about rituals, and then I realized rituals. I mean, everything in life is a ritual, because there are seasons, there are weeks, there are days.
Yeah.
The nature works around rituals. Bees, ants, fish, everything is a ritual. And so, as human beings, we create our rituals. So, having a pint of beer, having a cup of coffee at a certain time, we have rituals, whether we want it or not, or whether we are aware or not. So my question is, do you think habits are actually rituals, and that bring us back to our ancestors, to our primitive habits, to our primitive...
Yeah, and that's interesting, because the way you phrase that question is really powerful and interesting. Yes, because if you go back to our ancestors, right, when they created religion and laws and things like that was basically, that was to give stability to society. It was to create a mental well-being, isn't it?
That's the point.
Because if you don't, in society, if you don't have structure, which is habits, isn't it, in a sense, like laws governing us, otherwise people can go around and do whatever they want. Or some people want to say it's already like that at the moment. But going back to your question, and I want to answer that, is yes, it's ritual, but it depends how you interpret it, Chris. It depends your value system. It depends on what continent of society that you're from. In Africa or India or Asia or in Europe, it's different perspective and different way of looking at it. But it's a ritual habit. Habit is ritual. It's about repeating something, but in a positive mind frame. Yeah. And then practicing that, so that you can actually enhance your emotional and your consciousness, isn't it?
Exactly.
And that's, and I think it plays an important part. I mean, all of us have habits, Chris. It's just that we don't realize every day how much impact the habit is having on our life. For example, one of the habits that we all got into now is, we pay by card now, don't we, Chris? Yeah, I know you're gonna say, what is you talking about, Josh? But because we pay by card, there's a habit now, right, Chris, that we don't actually look at what we're spending. We just go bang, 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 right? And when we get the statement at the end of the month, you go, oh my God, how the hell did I spend all that money? So what we're creating a habit, where the value of money is not value, it's the card, but we can't see the value of the card because it's invisible. We can't see it, can you, Chris? Mm-hmm. And that, in turn, has a bad impact on our well-being, doesn't it?
Definitely.
So that habit is not healthy, is it? Because Go on, you said.
It might be healthy for somebody, maybe in some perspectives, because it's going out to
Well,
blow.
no, it's healthy for banks because then you're spending more money and you're getting in debt, and that's a bad habit to get into. But the way it's been structured, it's made to say, "Oh, it's easy. Don't worry. You don't need to carry a bank. It's safe." But what actually you're doing, you're creating a habit where society doesn't have physical money, but then you're not in control of that because we use the card, we don't physically see what we're spending. So emotionally, we can't connect to it. So it's become decentralized, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And
But I wonder, have we chosen it consciously? Was there a moment we
no, I don't think. No, I don't think we chose it. I think big institutions have chosen it, and we have accepted it as other things.
You see, that's a different thing. Choosing and accepting, two different things.
Yeah.
I mean, if you consciously choose to give up money and you use your card because it really reflects some of your values, which I would like to know what values are behind this kind of choice. But in any case, yes, why not? I mean, if you choose out of your values, there's a point. But otherwise, as many other things we do in life, is not. That was an example, but we do a lot of other things without thinking. So. Sometimes it's just healthy to stop for a moment and think, have I chosen this? It could be a little revolution in our life, you know.
No, I think we're going past that stage, Chris. I think we live in such society now where we want Disney, we want Amazon, we want Google, we want Facebook, we want everything. We want to be part of everything. We want to be part of TikTok. We want to be part of Twitter, everything, because we feel that if we're not part of that, then we don't belong to society. We want influencers to tell us what kind of habits to create, how we should feel, how we should behave. In our society, in terms of habits, we are losing the individuality. We are losing the time to say, right, let's step back. What is this doing to my well-being? You know, look at the work that we do, Chris, around relationship and emotional resilience. The work that we do, me and you, a lot of time, when people get into unhealthy relationship, not just with the same sex or different, or heterosexual, but generally with families and friends, and they create a habit where they are in a really, really toxic environment, but they can't get out of that because of the habit that they created in the subconscious in their mind, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That brings me back to, I mean, we talked about switching, changing, getting new habits. You asked me about consciousness and what is consciousness, why do we have conscious moments of consciousness? The point is, when we want to switch to other habits, where is the moment of realization that we have to change? I mean, when I talk to you about my stomach problem, which were related to my throat, I wouldn't have realized it if not because I had a problem that was growing. I had no idea that I could have dinner at 5 o'clock or 5 p.m. And I wouldn't have tried it either. I was not attracted by it, but I had to just because of the state I was in. So how can we actually realize that we are in a bad habit and we want to shift it into a good one?
Well, it's like the philosopher of the French philosopher says, "I am, therefore that I exist." Yeah. So it's at the point of realization, isn't it? It's when you actually realize, and it doesn't mean you realize when it's really bad for you. Realization comes in any point in any aspect of your life when you realize actually this is something I'm doing which is not good for me. That's when you need to change. Because if you change your habits when other people tell you you're not going to do it, because how many times, otherwise everyone who smokes will give up smoking, Chris, because everyone knows smoking is bad. Everyone knows drinking is bad. Everyone knows too much consumption of alcohol is not healthy for you. So the consciousness comes when you actually connect with your consciousness yourself and you say, right, this is something that's having detrimental impact on my performance, my existence, on my relationship with my family, my friends, and most importantly with myself. That's when you're going to change your habit. It's actualization, isn't it, Chris? Because it's like when we work with clients with AA, you cannot help them unless they say, actually, I'm an alcoholic, and I need to change.
And of course, I mean, there's a part of them that like it, that likes it. And I mean, drinking gives you pleasure, gives you certain sensations that you need. I mean, they don't do it because they want to torture themselves or because they want to kill themselves. They do it because there is pleasure, and pleasure is very important for them.
But also there comes self-sabotage in the habits too, because sometimes you might do self-sabotage because you don't feel you deserve the success, or you deserve a healthy relationship, or you deserve to be healthy. You feel in the back of your mind, maybe it's your upbringing, maybe the experience of your childhood trauma, something says to you subconsciously, you don't deserve this. Do everything possible to sabotage this. So, for example, I've got a client of mine who was in a healthy relationship, wonderful job, and one day he decided, actually, this is not something that I want. And when I was exploring with him, doing one-to-one, he said to me, look, I never felt that I deserved it. This is too much for me. And I've done everything possible to create a habit to make sure my relationship suffered. So it's about awareness around your self-consciousness, isn't it, Chris?
It is. And I think that you said something interesting, creating the individuality, that's where individuality is created. You said earlier when we were talking about habits and habit and having a structure, etc. The difference is, and I think the moment of realization happens the moment you turn your attention inside instead of outside, because outside anything can be true. One thing and its opposite. Everything is true. People can tell you that smoking is fantastic. Another person can tell you that it kills you. Another person. So on top of that, if you like that person, you want to please that person, and you compromise your values. You compromise, and that's when we have toxic relationships, because you want to content the other person. You want to be up to the other person. So the point is that we're looking outside of us too much. That will be just a moment of inner attention. To change, to give you a moment of realization. Your friend, you said your friend at some point realized that
it's a client of mine, it's not a friend, sorry, a client of mine.
Okay, our client, he realized that he wanted to change, but you don't get realization like that out of the blue. That's something because and it's either because you've looked inside for a moment, or because you are pushed to an extreme of health problems or something. So if you look inside, you may find all the answers to what you really want and what you really like or not.
And I'm so pleased you said that, because I think the answer always with the individual, because you have the ability, the notions, the skill sets to find out what is wrong and how to create a habit. Because everyone knows when whatever habit they have, they are the ones who know their mind and body better than anyone else. So they will be, it's about working on yourself really, and they will be able to identify, actually, the journey that I'm on, it's not healthy, it's not productive, it's not serving me good. What do I need to do? So if every day, if you're out there and you're thinking, right, my habits are not really healthy for me, they are having impact on my emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being in my relationship, ask yourself this question: what am I doing now, and what could I do in future to make my life much better? Now, when I'm talking about it, I'm not talking about making dramatic change. You can look at small changes. Just look at every aspect of your life. What could you do? You could do, for example, when I'm talking about exercise, you could do 10 minutes exercise, just go for a walk, or you could do sit up, anything you want. So create a small, a habit. It's like, when you do brushing your teeth, right, Chris? Every morning we get up, we brush our teeth, we have a shower. That's a ritual, that's a habit. So what we need to create a habit is like a daily routine like that in the morning, we have lunch, breakfast, tea. So that's what it should be. A habit should be something that becomes automatic to us. So we can create that, it's normal, but it's healthy. But also, I would also say, create a habit of some time, just taking 5 or 2 or 3 minutes, wherever you want, to reflect. Turn your mobile phones off. Don't talk to anyone. Just sit there for a few minutes and let your thought, just analyze what's happening. Because that's a great habit to have. self-reflection, and gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most important things too in terms of habits.
What you were saying about starting small is very important. I saw a very interesting documentary that looked into how nature works, and everything in nature is based on economy. So nothing in nature, be it bees or any other insect or nature itself, like plants, etc., it's all based on economy. Nothing overdoes. There's no waste of energy. Now, we sometimes, when we start some habits, we tend to waste some energy because let's say, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna take up running, so I'm gonna go run for like half an hour, 1 hour, and then it's absolutely draining. I know a coach who has a gym, and he started this very interesting experiment. He said, okay, I'm going to take you to a 5 kilometers run in a certain time. I don't remember how much. The first day, the assignment was run from one room to the other one. That's it.
Yeah.
And well, you realize that it's feasible because anybody can do it. But then you do that every day for a week. The week after, it says, okay, go outside and run around your house. Is it feasible? Is it possible? And then the more you realize that there is a certain economy because you're not overdoing, you're not tired, but you're still expanding, that's exactly when things click and the habits start to work. So it's actually based on economy, pleasure, and improvement. And then he got these people running 5 kilometers together. I don't know after how many months, but they made it. And it was not a big effort for them because it was just a slow expansion. And I think that works with everything. You want to eat more fruit? Eat a blueberry, just one blueberry today.
Yeah.
Not going to be a big effort.
And that's what we've been talking about for the last hour. We've been saying, look, manage habit in a small portion. Don't go dramatic, because it's all about being aware, self-reflection, and understanding that change takes time. And creating positive habits takes time. Yeah. So, Chris, we're coming to the end of the show. Thank you for joining me. Before we finish, is there anything you'd like to say and share with us before I do the closure of the show?
Well, I would just recap some of the important keywords we found, and that stands out to me. That's very interesting to me as well, which is economy that we just talked about now. Structure and gratitude, and in these 3 points, rituals are your habits. So if we take it as a very simple thing like that, changing habits, changing routines, changing your life becomes easy.
Yeah, so, and I agree with you. I will just point and add to say, look, when you're looking at your habits, first of all, ask yourself question: are my habits serving me? What are my value? How do I create habits which are fundamentally going to have a more positive impact on my life? And remember, it's about small steps, not dramatically changing your life. So, and also I will say to my listeners, get time to reflect and analyze, every day, as you say, about gratitude, and look at what have I learned today about my habits. How has my habit helped me to shape me, to perform, to be in relationship, and also explore the habits in terms of how is it having an impact with yourself and what relationship do you have with your habits? Yeah. On that note, Chris, I will say thank you very much for joining me, and I'd like to say to my listeners, thank you for joining us today, Chris and myself.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Till next week, my listeners, I hope you have a safe night and enjoy yourself. And till next week, this is Josh saying goodbye and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Good evening, everyone.
Dear listeners, and thank you for joining Josh today. And it's good to talk to Josh now. So today's subject is going to be about